The Brandon Peters Show may contain explicit language and detailed plot points. For more information on the show, stay tuned to the end of the episode. And now, here he is, Brandon.
Welcome to another edition of the Brandon Peters Show. Today you'll be listening to a recording I made back at Days of the Dead in Indianapolis on July 19th, 2026. This, folks, is a conversation with Gaylen Ross. Gaylen Ross, an Emmy and multi-award winning documentary filmmaker, but many know her as Francine from George A. Romero's zombie masterpiece, Dawn of the Dead. Gaylen and I sit down here and we talk about said Dawn of the Dead and her acting career, but mainly dive into her documentary career, which I think is equally as fascinating as Dawn of the Dead. I want to thank, first off, Audery Lane from Days of the Dead Film Festival for setting this up and okaying it and getting it to come through. She's one of the coolest and best people in the world, as well as another equally cool person, Brittany Reyes, who stood in as a set photographer while we were doing the interview. And of course, big thanks to Gaylen Ross to agreeing for this, to working it out with me, for being so kind and generous. And a little tidbit here, you're going to notice a change in audio quality. We had a little bit of a technical snafu, plus wanting to follow up on some things with the recording. So Gaylen and I actually met a few weeks later on Zoom and continued our conversation, as well as patched up some things in the original conversation. So very, very grateful to her for that. Also, since this is now August, late August when this is dropping, some things have been dated since we chatted. For instance, we talk about there being the final Living Dead weekend in Monroeville at the mall. Since has been announced, and there's going to be another Living Dead weekend in October, which Gaylen will be a part of. So kudos to that. As she jokes, it's like they're having a kiss farewell tour with the Monroeville Mall. But if you haven't been there, you should check it out. It's pretty awesome. But I'll quit rambling now and take you back in time to July 19th, 2026, as I sit down and have a conversation with Gaylen Ross. Welcome to the Brandon Peters Show, coming to you from Days of the Dead, Indianapolis, 2026. As part of the film festival, I am providing a conversation with my guest, Gaylen Ross.
Thank you.
Who many here coming to the convention know from Dawn of the Dead, but majority of your career is an award-winning, very highly decorated documentarian. And we're just going to have a little bit of a talk about your career from Dawn to where you are now. But you started, so you're here, you're kind of back home here where you grew up here. You graduated from Broad Ripple High School, and then from there went to California for school and then New York for school.
Correct. That's what I did.
So real quick on the high school front, if things serve correct, you were just a couple years away from David Letterman?
Yeah, probably.
Did you ever cross paths? Nothing?
No, I think he was the older brother of a friend of mine, so we didn't really, those days everybody sort of stuck with their age in that lane. So.
Gotcha. Very, very, very cool. Yeah, I went to Ball State University, and people had stories about him even when I was there, talking about what he did. So you wind up, you're in New York, and you're mainly into poetry.
I was a literary editor for a small press at the time I went to school at the New School, and I met a poet, Daniel Halpern, who had a small press called Echo Press and a literary magazine called Antaeus that he had started with Paul Bowles and Drew Hines, the Hines ketchup lady, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he needed help, so I came on board, and I became managing editor of Antaeus, and then grew to Echo Press. So that was pretty incredible days. I mean, those were, the days of, if Richard Price's first piece ever was published by us. And the Antaeus, the magazine, no longer exists in publication, but the Echo Press is still award-winning Pulitzer publication. So it's incredible. And at the time, I met somebody, I can't remember, I was riding horses or something crazy like that. And I met a woman riding horses, and her name, I think, was Katita Lord. I can't believe I remembered that. And she was an actress, and I was fascinated by what she was doing. And she was saying, well, you have to take classes. And so as I was working with the magazine and the press, I started taking acting classes, and that's how I ended up acting.
Gotcha. Were you doing theater with acting? Just trying to do any possible
Well,
route,
first you do classes, and then you do whatever you can. I think my first job I was a chicken, in a children's show.
All right. With like public access TV or
no, it was theater.
Theater? Okay.
Yeah, children's show down in the village, and
all right.
That was my chicken days.
Any pictures from that era
Probably.
of you as the chicken?
I think I have a picture.
Oh my
gosh. Where
gosh.
was the chicken? I think.
Okay, that's hilarious. So how do you wind up in doing that and then winding up in Pittsburgh for Dawn of the Dead? And
I was in acting class, and one of my acting classes, there was an actress, Sarah Venable, who was a colleague and a close friend of an amazing man, Ben Barenholtz, who was a film distributor and foreign film distributor, and he brought every foreign film that we know now to the States when people were not bringing foreign films, like Kuzan Cuisine and Vida and all sorts of foreign directors. But he also discovered John Sayles, and he discovered the Coen brothers, and he discovered David Lynch. And Ben was sharing an office at the time with George Romero and Richard Rubinstein. And they had separate businesses, but they were sharing the office space. So she had found out that they were casting this film called Dawn of the Dead, and they were looking for a blonde. So I remember she jumped up and said, they're looking for blondes. So I said, okay. Right. So I went down to audition, because that's what you did in those days. You just auditioned for anything. You didn't know what you were auditioning for, but you just auditioned. And
you auditioned for George?
I auditioned for George. I had monologues. Usually you have monologues prepared, and I had this monologue from this really off-Broadway playwright called Jean-Claude Van Italy, who was really wonderful. And I love that monologue always. And it was a monologue, something, the language was, are you safe? Do you feel safe? And two people are talking, and they say, what do you mean by safe? And the idea is that you could cross the street after saying goodbye, and something would happen, and you would never see that person again. And are you really safe? And so it was a very sort of existential thing. So I changed the monologue a little bit, as if this really happened to me. So I remember at the end of the monologue, George just looked at me and said, oh, I'm so sorry. I said, why are you sorry? He goes, for your friend who died. I said, nobody died. I said, it was acting. It was a monologue. So I think I scared George.
Okay.
So he remembered me.
Gotcha.
And then I was called back, and then I got the part, but I had no idea who George Romero was.
Right. Well, because, he did Night of the Living Dead was huge, but then he does a lot of more regional films after that.
But I never saw Night of the Living Dead.
You never saw it? Had you heard of it even?
I think, who knows?
Who knows? Okay. But they did show it to you, right, before you guys went into...
Well, they showed it once we were cast.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, so once we were cast, I had no idea what this was. And then we had a screening in the office. I think it was Scott and Ken and David and George. And he showed me Night of the Living Dead, and it was like, oh my God, what is this? So I didn't know what was happening. Was this... was he going to make a film that was similar in the way that the characters would respond? So I did talk to George at the time, and I said, I will go forward with the film, but I'm not going to be a victim like that. And so I said, that's my bottom line. I'm not going to scream, and I'm not going to cry. I'm not, if that's what you want, I can't do it. Right. I didn't want to do it. So he said, okay, it's not in the script that way. And if it was, he would work with it.
Yeah, I was wondering, what was Francine like on paper before you put your own touch and advisory on it?
I think it was the script was very close to what, the film ended up being. The only thing that started to change was that I felt just the chemistry with the real life people and the actors and what was happening on screen was moving away from Fran's character and her strength. And I didn't feel like she had a real response to that. I did end up speaking to George at some point during the shoot. I think it was when we were at the mall, probably, yeah. Mm-hmm. And said we need to find a way to reinforce Fran more because she's becoming too ancillary to the piece so that it's becoming a guy's action film.
Right.
And so he agreed. And that's when he came back and rewrote the lines where I come in and say, I would have all made you breakfast, but I don't have my pots and pans.
It's a great line, yeah.
It's a great line. And I want to fly the helicopter and I want to learn how to shoot the gun. And, and a lot of eye rolling with the guys. So, yeah, it was a surprise, I think, to the actors. They were like, they weren't quite prepared for that scene. But it ended up working really well, I think.
Yeah, I think Francine, like the strength of her that I like, and as I've grown older and see in it, is the guys seem to settle with them all, and you seem to be thinking of, we might not be able to be here forever. We only have one helicopter pilot. I probably need to shoot. We might not. It seems like you don't even accept the marriage proposal, so you're truly
that
not
poor
settling.
Marriage.
Yeah,
that's the one scene that I never understood. It was like so sad. That David. I mean,
when it's followed by the droopy bed scene where it's just this is life.
And George is such a conservative. He's really Catholic. He was not going to have a nudity scene. Really, it was like, this is it. Okay, cut. We're done, and that was fine. But, yeah, that romance with Flyboy really was marginal, I think.
Right.
I think there was a point also in the film that turned the makeup scene, which I really, that was her private moment where the guys were, throwing cash up at the bank and they were eating the sausages at the deli and doing all the fun stuff. The makeup scene, I think, is pivotal because it turns just sad. It starts out with this sort of fun idea of the makeup and playing with the gun, and then you hear the voice of recording of the mall shoppers, one of those recorded announcements, and then that's the reality intrudes into that scene, and that's where everything changes. And I think that's where the film changes. Mm-hmm. Scotty dies. Then the
down to
bikers
3
come in.
Bikers, yeah. Luckily, you're there because you can fly the helicopter away.
Yeah, well, it's amazing how many fans think that I actually flew the helicopter. It's like, guys, come on.
Right. How were the lessons for the? Yeah, that's crazy. And I did notice there's some things in you've recorded a commentary. I don't know how long ago for the film, but there's some things that give me an interesting new perspective that you mentioned in that commentary they have. And I noticed, we talk about the scene with the pots and pans, but I noticed, she's presented as a person, and it's kind of sadly still present in our world today, is you're first shown as being a person at the workplace, having some power, be able to make some big decisions, but then when it gets to real world survival, deciding about the fate of the world between 3 guys and you're left out of the picture.
Yeah, I'm the passenger. And pregnant too, which was a very bizarre conversation when you think about when she overhears the idea that Peter can take care of the pregnancy.
Right.
Like, what? I don't know that's even. It was a concept then to say he could perform an abortion. I mean, that's that's always been
it's even if I wanted to, no thanks.
But the arrogance of that was incredible.
Right. Yeah, and it's presented pretty bluntly the way it is. So,
but it's interesting, how many of these end of the world stories have a pregnant woman who's supposed to be the future, a survival of the race.
Right.
I mean, Children of Men has that.
Children of Men,
right?
A Quiet Place has a pregnant woman as well. Yeah,
that there's one creature that's supposed to carry on the
right. Well, and the remake, the Zack Snyder one, they flip it and it's a nasty situation.
Right.
With the pregnant woman.
Even Rosemary's Baby, there's there's something about carrying on, something. But the idea that there's one, and you have to protect the woman. I don't know about Walking Dead if they have any or Lost.
Oh, they had I know in the comic book Walking Dead there was the main character's wife was pregnant, and then she got slaughtered by some one of the main villains at the time had an attack where they were staying, and she got just obliterated during it. It was pretty ugly. But
well, it's funny, at the time when the film opened, and it opened in, a theater on 47th Street in New York, in one of the theaters, and there were theaters there that were not multiplex, but they were like single theaters with balconies, they were great. Right. And so that was the theater that Dawn first was premiered. And sometimes I would go and just see the film because, why not? It's like the Tarantino film, the Hollywood film, the one.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Yeah. She would go. Remember, she would go to see herself in the So I did, and I was in the balcony, and it was a pretty packed theater, and people would talk to the screen. They would just get so excited, and they would talk to the screen. And at the beginning, I think it was about that scene when they revealed that she's pregnant, and what are we going to do with her? And I. There were these people screaming at the screen, just leave the bitch, just leave her, dump her. And I was going, no. And so I reacted. I said, no, wait. She gets better. Better. And they turned around to me. They turned to the screen. I think they were just absolutely horrified. That was like the most horrifying example of horror that they ever had. That was,
I don't feel right now. It's not supposed to be interactive.
Yeah, but I think that was the general audience response, is that, in the beginning, she's presented as a drag on the survival as opposed to somebody who's going to turn it around.
Right. Yeah. True. Left behind me. We're going to go get supplies, just hang out the helicopter. And then, but yeah, she makes herself assertive later, learns around these guys. But, were you ever present when Dario Argento was on the set?
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
Were you aware of him or anything?
The only thing I knew was that he was a money investor in the film. But there was a funny night in the mall where I came one night. I wasn't working, so I just was coming to check things out. And I was I had this favorite yellow parka that was so distressed and such, but I just loved it. And no makeup on, and my hair was sort of up. And I ran into Richard Rubenstein, who was the producer, and I said, so when are you going to introduce me to Dario? And he looked at me and he said, if I introduce you to Dario and you look like that, I'll take the money out of the film. I said, okay. But I was looking, it's that's the female lead. And so he did not introduce me to Dario.
Okay. The Monroeville Mall is getting torn down, apparently, or something. And you just
Walmart, I think, bought it.
You just had the last Living Dead weekend taking place in there. What's your feelings on, that's kind of like if you were in college and there was a sorority or fraternity house you could always go back to, but now it's gone, can't. Is it sad for you, or you're just I
don't go back to
You don't go back to
mall.
I went, so when I heard Walmart bought it, I was like, I have to go see it. I always wanted to be inside of it. I did it one time, but going inside, I was like, okay, I can see why this is gonna.
It's another mall that is failing in so many ways, and I have no nostalgia for the mall.
Yeah, we went
but
in.
People do, fans do. They feel very strongly about their connection to it because of the film, and I understand that. And we were there having that convention, and it was great fun, and. They were doing tours of the mall, and the fans know the film and details and moments in the mall far, far, far better than I do or the rest of the cast, because they watch it so much, the film.
Right.
And they have a connection to it, and, but that's, it's life.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, it is. When I went, I'm like, well, I'm glad I did this because, I can, we went with my wife and my kids. We went, and we were the only people not working at the mall there on a Friday. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, I know. It's just,
and my kids were like, it looks the same. I was like, yep.
What was surprising is that there's still a lot of stores there, that are actually operating. I think a Barnes & Noble and Starbucks, and there's a Cineplex there. And,
gotcha.
There are things that people do. I just don't know how it's frequented.
Right. Yeah. I just went to a mall in Muskegon, Michigan, because there's a notable video store in there. And that mall was even more decrepit.
Really?
Yeah. It was all independent shops in it.
Yeah,
there was no
I think
commercial.
I think that the malls that are thriving, if they're thriving now, are really, really high-end malls. They look like Las Vegas, It's like, they've got Saks and Neiman Marcus and Hermes and, all the high-end. So, and those places somehow thrive. And same thing, everywhere.
Yeah, our malls here are like fine. They're currently like
Not
you go
the
there.
Coliseum.
Not the we have
the
the
downtown
fashion
mall.
The downtown mall, the Circle Center's
That's a
getting torn down.
disaster.
Well, yeah, they're building an outside one.
Yeah, well, I mean,
So,
that's the idea. People want to shop and walk like
shop and walk.
outside, but that's not a good sign there.
There are plenty of decrepit malls in Indianapolis, but the two that the Castleton
Keystone,
and
but that's
Keystone,
a very high-end mall.
right. True.
True,
true,
but
yeah.
Castleton, I'm not sure about, but Keystone
Yeah,
is.
it's a whole culture that's on its decline. Yes.
Right.
But-
They go there and it's like they go to lunch and it's high-end, Anyway, but that's
a
the
whole
way
vibe,
it is.
yeah.
Exactly.
Gotcha. So after Dawn, you do a cult classic film called Mad Men, and then you rejoin with George again for Creepshow.
Yeah.
Were you just phone call? I got something for you, Gaylen.
Yeah, basically it was that. You want to come down, we'll have a good time.
And that's where you had your epiphany of becoming behind the
when
camera.
I was very wet and being drowning, and I saw George sitting cross-legged in his parka on the sand and very dry, and I said, it looks a lot better over there.
How do I get your gig? Yeah. And I know, in that movie, you're on a TV, buried in sand, getting water splashed, and then when you're out of the sand, you're covered in prosthetics.
Yeah, and seaweed.
And seaweed.
Yeah, exactly.
How long, was it just a short time filming for that? Or?
Yeah, it was like a few days in the Jersey Shore, and then we went down to Pittsburgh to film the interiors with Leslie Nielsen, which was great fun. I mean, we ended up making more money on the bloopers, Danson and I, because we could never keep a straight face around Nielsen. Either he was, cracked some joke, or he had this fart machine, and so we were there to kill him, and then he would open the door, and that would be the end of that. So I remember there was this show called Bloopers with Dick Clark, and he would show all the outtakes, and they had to pay us. So that was why we made more money on the bloopers. Right. That was good.
That's good, yeah. Very cool. So and you met on that Leslie Nielsen, Ted Danson, Stephen King.
Stephen was there. Yeah, we had I remember a great dinner with Stephen. Stephen was there to do Geordie, the guy covered with green moss from the asteroid. He was in heaven. He was just having such a great time working with George as an actor.
Gotcha.
And then Ted and Leslie and we all went out to dinner, and George, and of course Leslie brought his fart machine through the whole thing. So he was
love that fart machine.
That was great. Stephen and George were like, okay, that's it. That's what we're doing.
There we go. Yeah, he was. Yeah, this was like almost to his turn as a comedic actor too.
I guess so. Yeah, because he had. Then he started Airport and Naked Gun, I think.
Yeah, and then once Naked Gun hit,
he was so brilliant.
Yeah.
Nobody was funnier.
Oh yeah, he was. Oh, if he came out, that was an event.
Yeah.
You go see the new Leslie Nielsen parody. He was quite great. So so Creepshow. There's then sounds like a job interview thing. There's like a 7-year gap in your career or something between your first documentary and the end of Creepshow, or is there more? I know you
directing theater.
I
was directing theater.
I meant visual media. Yeah.
Oh, visual. I was directing theater. I moved from acting to directing theater, and I was working a lot down at this place called the West Bank Cafe, which was on 42nd and 9th Avenue, and it was an amazing place where we did one-act plays. I think Andrew Sorkin got his first play done there. Everybody in New York and Broadway either was acting or had their plays done. And so I was directing some of the theater then. It was a triumvirate from Yale, Rand Forrester, Rusty McGee, and the comedian Louis Black. He became a comedian through the West Bank, his stand-up there. So that went on for quite a few years where we had this revolving theater. Every night there were one-act plays. It was packed, with people.
Gotcha. Did you ever, in the meantime, read for any like high-profile TV or film roles that you didn't grab, that there's like this alternate universe that you got? Or?
No, I didn't.
No?
I wasn't acting.
You weren't acting? Even in the time during Creepshow and that?
No, the only thing I wanted to do was direct them.
I gotcha.
And that was tough. There was Richard had at the time, the series was sort of a spin-off of, not Creepshow, but There was a whole series that they were creating, and there were like 3 seasons of it. And Richard would always put me off. It's like, next season you can direct.
Oh, okay.
Next season. And I went back and I looked at it, and I think after 3 seasons there was 1 woman he allowed to direct, and the rest of it were the men. So there you go. But no, I wasn't acting. I didn't want to act.
Apparently it was done. I mean, you hit the jackpot on the 3 you did, so there's fans of all of them.
Yeah, it's fun. It's amazing that these films, especially Dawn, has that kind of longevity.
Right. Yeah. When did it first hit you that I'm like, I'm going to have to be known for this the rest, that's going to come for the rest of my life?
That it's going to be the first line of my obit?
That's it. Like, how this is going to be tacked on to me forever.
It's not just tact, but the idea that this is like literally the first. I could do 1 million documentaries, but that's going to be the
Dawn of the Dead,
the female lead of a Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
I think it was Todd Gilchrist. I can't remember, who did a variety piece, and he did a big variety piece, and I think it was on the anniversary of. He's doing a piece about me. And it was other films, but basically, it was done. And then, it was like, that's clear. It's just clear to me.
Yeah, sure.
Which is good. I own it. I embrace it.
Yeah.
And it's fun. In the beginning, it was difficult. In the beginning, it was difficult in terms of, would people not take my documentary work seriously?
Right.
But it's funny because, the female lead of the remake of Dawn, Sarah Polley, ended up directing.
Also becomes
And she becomes both a narrative and a documentary filmmaker, too. So, and I thought, well, if Sarah can do it, I can do the switch too. But I think there were some times where sometimes my films are controversial in different political ways. And if there was a detractor, they would say, oh, well, why can't we take her seriously? She's a, horror film actress. This is like easy to dismiss.
Right.
So that was difficult.
Gotcha. Yeah, I had a friend, Scott Mendelson, wrote for Forbes for many years, and anytime someone didn't like his review of a movie, they'd be like, well, why do we go to Forbes for a movie review? Anyway?
It's,
They got nothing. That's when
like,
they have nothing when that's,
Well, I mean, they'll just, the thing now is they'll dismiss anything. Oh, he used to write for the New York Times. How can you take that seriously?
Right, yeah.
It's like, that rag.
Yep.
So it's like, everything,
yeah, it's crazy. So, first documentary is Out of Solidarity that you direct?
A Polish family.
Yeah, and how hard was that to come together to get, because you said you were having trouble, people promising you, oh, we'll get you directing this, like, was this an independent, on your own, presented?
Well, documentaries are different because, they're not necessarily commissioned in that way, but I was working part-time with community organizations with the university, and there was a community organization that wanted to do a little video, and I turned the little video into a film, and it ended up on PBS. So the whole thing actually started with an astrologer. It's really funny. It's true. My whole career was about an astrologer. I was directing this big theater piece at the Cooper Union in New York, big hall. And I went to this astrologer. She was the mother of an actor named Michael Magada. Michael was an actor who starred in Drive. He said he did a lot of these indie films and she said, you can, that date is good. And she said, you can do it on this date. Okay. She goes, but you have to film it. And I said, I don't have any money to film it. She goes, well, you have to film it. And she never dug her heels into anything. She goes, I don't care. You have to film it. You have to film it. That's it. You just borrow the money, do whatever you have to do. So I did. I borrowed the money. I think it was like $1,500 or something.
Okay.
And this friend of mine said, well, there's a cameraman. He's working out on his own. He came out of Maisels. He was the assistant camera to Albert Maisels. And he's looking for projects, that he can do. So he hooked me up with, it's Jill Heineman, and he hooked me up with Bob Richmond. And Bob, we started working in 1984, and we've been working ever since together. And Bob has become one of the premier cinema verite documentary filmmakers. He's did the film on Metallica and the Paradise Lost films. And,
wow. All right.
I mean, everything that he did, the Vogue documentary. I mean, it's like huge. His list is huge.
Yeah.
But we're still working together.
Hey, that's great. Yeah, you hit the ground running with a lot of TV work and documentaries there through the 90s.
Yeah.
A lot of it, including Dealers Among Dealers.
Well, Dealers Among Dealers wasn't really a TV. It was a documentary. That was our first big Bob and I did.
Okay.
It ended up being a feature documentary film that premiered both on PBS on the series POV, and also premiered in the Berlin Film Festival, and then went also all around the world. And actually, we're doing a 4K restoration of it now. This was the film on New York's 47th Street in the Diamond World and Christie's and the auction houses at Sotheby's in Geneva. So we traveled with them and got the inside, not talking heads, but the verite, real life story that nobody got before and nobody can get now because the world has significantly changed for that.
There's a great line in there. There's like a woman commenting, and she's like, I understand why it's all these guys deciding what I'm wearing and do it. Why are they so into that? Why isn't it us? I
mean, the reality is it started with men, and the diamond world came from a whole history of immigrants and culture and survival, because if you survived, you took a diamond in your pocket and you could live maybe. But now it's very different. There's a lot of women in the business, but that's true for every business. Everything has changed. Listen, there were no women lawyers 50 years ago, and now, or veterinarians, and it's all shifted. Rabbis, everything has changed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, after that one, you land yourself an Emmy award with Blood Money, Switzerland's Nazi Gold, where you wrote and produced, and then Stephen Chrisman directs. So was this a collaborative effort and you decided not to direct, or he would? No,
he had already started directing, and then I came on. I also wanted to do the film, but he said, join me. And he was married at the time to Mariel Hemingway. Yeah, it was the first and only film, I think, that exists now. It's now streaming, Blood Money, about Switzerland keeping the money from the Holocaust survivors in their accounts, and the settlement that they ended up reaching for that. So that was pretty amazing. I mean, we were getting, as documents started to come out, as they were releasing them from government archives, we were getting them in our fax machine at the same time. That it was pretty exciting.
That's pretty exciting stuff there. Did you get anybody stop doing this, or any kind of potential pushback in your investigating on it, or?
No, I think no. I mean, this was a huge worldwide event at the time. I mean, Clinton was on it, and the senator. Everybody was trying to get the Swiss to pay up.
Yeah.
Swiss neutrality was being questioned seriously at the time.
Was there an award ceremony for your Emmy, or was it just like?
I think we had it. Yeah, it was.
Did you
get
to give a little speech, or
no? We don't give speeches. No.
Gotcha. Because I have a friend. She has an Emmy, and it was literally it was at a side something, and they mailed it to her.
Yeah. I think there was something, and who knows? It was, but no, we just took the Emmy. The Emmy was for the research of the film. It was funny because at the same time we were competing against the BBC. This was commissioned by A&E, when A&E used to be doing serious feature documentaries, not just reality shows.
That's what a lot of them have turned into.
Well, most of them have, yeah. So we were competing with them, and BBC ended up winning the race. They got out first, but they made a serious mistake in the film, so they had to pull the film. So we were the one and only ones that survived then. Wow. You have to be careful with your research.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oof. Has that ever happened to you?
No, because I'm incredibly not yet, very, very careful about my sources and my research. And there's no reason to make things up or exaggerate. It's not even like making things up. It's like exaggerating facts.
Yeah.
You have to be very careful if you're doing documentaries, and that's why people are very concerned about how AI is coming into documentaries, if they are, where the sources come from.
Right. You ever interview somebody and it unlocks a door to another layer of your documentary you weren't thinking about, or takes something in another direction?
Yeah, I mean, the film Killing Costner, about the man who negotiated with Adolf Eichmann, the Hungarian Jew who ended up rescuing, they said, 1,600 from occupied Hungary that ended up in Switzerland, and then perhaps another 100,000 were saved by his negotiations from a labor camp instead of going to Auschwitz. That happened because I was interviewing a woman who was part of the Swiss banks story, and she had testimony in the Senate, and she said, my father told me to come to Switzerland, and I was on the Kastner train, and when I got to Switzerland to ask about my family's account, and then I said, what Kastner train? So that's
the genesis for a whole nother documentary comes out of that.
A whole other documentary came out of that, where at the beginning for the Kastner film, I was really dissuaded not to do it because people would say, no, don't do that film. It's much too controversial. There's too many issues around it. So, but of course that made me want to do it more. There were several films between, but that was always in my mind. How do I do the story about Kastner?
And Kastner, that film's interesting. You place yourself in that film. And you drive it. What do you enjoy being that? Or where's the decision where, like, I'm going to be the person, or instead of casting someone to do a voice narration or something like that?
That's the only film where I put myself in it. And I think that happened because it was me revealing a story. And so when I wasn't in it, it was just voiceover. I was finding things out about facts and trying to uncover them. And also looking for the assassin of Kastner, because Kastner was murdered. And so I had to look for the assassin. So it became a very personal story about uncovering the truth. And somehow I ended up feeling that my presence in this story was the driving force, because I was looking for the answers. Normally, I don't put myself in.
That's a bit more of a thrill to it, too, to the more of some suspense with it. Because, I mean, you're one hanging out with an assassin for the movie.
With the assassin,
and then you unite him with the family of the person with Kastner's surviving family.
Right.
Were you on kind of like pins and needles with that, or how does that play out? Because that's like, it's a lot of emotion, it's a lot of
well, they both agreed to do it.
Right.
They agreed to do it, but I had to be very, very careful because one of the people that was in the film was very, very well known, the granddaughter Mirav. So we had to negotiate a hotel room that was like very, very private and keep it secret that this meeting would happen, because the newspapers would pick up on it instantly that this meeting would, because the assassin never spoke in all those years, really. So, it was a lot of negotiation of walking two paths between the family of Kastner and then with the assassin story, because that was also a story of how a young man gets motivated to extremist viewpoints, not unlike a lot of different cultures and politics and events today.
No, you're right. That film got a lot of really good reviews and showed at Toronto International Film Festival.
Yeah, it premiered in Toronto.
And was there an attempt at an Oscar campaign for it at all, or?
I can't remember. I don't think we did. I know why we didn't do an Oscar campaign, because you had to, at the time, I think you had to limit any television for a period if you were going to be accepted for an Oscar nom.
Oh, okay.
And Israel really, really wanted the film very badly, and we felt that it would be wrong to hold it back, and that's why we decided to let it be broadcast. And it was broadcast, it was incredible. It was broadcast over and over again in Israel, and at the same time, there's a holiday, I don't know, it's a date called Yom HaShoah, which is the date of remembrance for the anniversary of the Holocaust. And it was not only broadcast on television in Israel, but it was shown in 2 different screens at the Jerusalem Theater, with 900 people viewing it the same night. So, the attention for it was really important, and we wanted Israel to have it. But then, and it was also shown on BBC too, so.
Gotcha. Wherever it goes, that's great for it and all.
And also Oscars, they're so overplayed. How many films that are really good, really great documentaries never get nominated?
The best campaign wins, right?
It's not just the best campaign. It's what's the best politics.
There you go. That too.
It's politics, and it's also who has the most sympathy right now. If you're doing a film, and they're all really, really good films, but, if you're doing a film that's anti-Russia, that has a much better chance of being nominated.
True.
And of course it won this year. And that's the reality of Oscars.
The moment we're at that. Yeah. Your latest film is Shapiro v. Ford, The Jew Who Sued Henry Ford, which released in January. And are you still doing promotion and stuff for that as we speak?
Oh, the film is still in festivals. I mean, it hasn't gone into streaming yet because we're still getting a lot of acceptance into film festivals. We're going to Boston in the fall, a lot of festivals in the fall, including Switzerland and Australia. I mean, it's doing really, really well. The story itself, it's a 100-year-old story. It's about Henry Ford in the 1920s. And he was probably the second wealthiest man, if not in America, the world. And he had a issue with Jews. And so he really was probably the premier anti-Semite in the country at the time. And what he had was a publication that he created, because when you're a wealthy millionaire, billionaire, as Ford was even at that time, you create a publication that is a megaphone for your ideas. And he created the Dearborn Independent, which essentially every week in the 1920s had one or another terrible thing to say about what the Jews were responsible for, not only everything from dance to alcohol to theater to jazz to everything that Ford thought was not American. It was communist. And in any case, this was Henry Ford. But what he did was he focused on this Jewish lawyer, Aaron Shapiro, who was at the time creating with farmers cooperatives all over the country for their product. And the idea was to make sure that farmers had a proper payment for their product, whether it was fruits or vegetables or oats or wheat or tobacco, and that they weren't being ripped off by the buyer market, the monopoly that existed then. And Shapiro extended this to Canada, across the border, to the wheat industry in the wheat farmers in Saskatchewan and Alberta. And at that point, Henry Ford saw this Jewish lawyer and organizer of farmers as an example of the Jewish conspiracy of taking over the world and the economy. So he went after Shapiro in the Dearborn Independent. And, you can libel groups as you want, but if you end up libeling individuals, you could end up in difficulty, which is what happened with Ford, because Aaron Shapiro sued him. And that became the trial of this anti-Semite. And it's really fascinating because the lawsuit was really a David and Goliath story. David being, of course, Aaron Shapiro, and the Goliath was Henry Ford and his huge machinery behind him. But it managed to make sure that the Dearborn Independent stopped publication, ironically, about the same year that the Model T stopped production. And stopping the publication of the Dearborn Independent was hugely important. I mean, I would also add that Hitler was a big, big fan of Henry Ford, and he had Henry Ford's picture on the wall, and he has mentioned Henry Ford in his Mein Kampf, and had republished many of the Jewish articles that Ford had in Germany to make sure that they were disseminated there, so that by the end of the Dearborn Independent in that trial, it really stopped Ford from being actually a megaphone for Hitler and the Nazis, because they couldn't use that as a dissemination tool. It's an interesting story, although it's grounded in history. I think, it has a lot of resonance today. Know.
And your film does you do some nice cutting and editing to show the parallels of the cycle of our lives, that the unfortunate cycles we go through that seem to, rhyme and, make, repeat.
Right.
Unfortunately.
I mean, anti-Semitism certainly didn't begin with Henry Ford, and it didn't. It's not going to end with Henry Ford.
No, and I believe you talk about a detail that he was putting another slanderous piece of text in there, like the International Jew was getting put in given with purchases of Model Ts or something like that.
Yes, I mean he took the worst example of anti-Semitic literature, which was the Protocols of Zion, and it was a strange publication that started in Russia, pre-Soviet Russia, then was disseminated in Europe, and then Henry Ford got a hold of it and created the International Jew, 4 volumes of all of the tropes and the slander and the accusations against Jews. And that's what Hitler made sure was republished in Germany.
This film puts a spotlight on something that, in my education in the United States, in the Midwest, where they get the Henry Ford he creates the Model T and business booms, and there we go. Right? That's it. Nothing.
But I think, even in Detroit, as the film was screened in festivals, we had different audience members, of course, and there were some members said that they came from Detroit and that they remembered that their parents were not allowed to work in the factory because they were Jewish. There was also this great thing that Ford had, which was the melting pot. He had a lot of immigrants working, but they had to go through a process where they would sort of detoxify as immigrants and become American citizens in this melting pot ceremony where they would step into this fake papier-mâché pot with their native costumes and then come out with the Ford little uniforms on. I mean, it was really, he and then also I think in the years after, I mean, he was really awful with unions and the workers there. So that was another issue, but it was after our film.
That should be in I was given a book when I was in high school by a friend of mine's mother who I was saying something about the Roman Empire. She goes, "That's not true." I'm like, "What do you mean that's not true?" And then she gave me this book that was like the truth about history they don't teach you in school or something like that. And that's where I learned about Columbus and all sorts. I was like, "Oh my gosh, what are we doing here?" And then
sounds like one of the books of historian Howard Zinn. That would have been no.
I don't know, but this Henry Ford stuff should have been in there. It was not in there, but it should have been in there. But this was in the 90s that I got this book, and I was just like, wow. And then I went into college and had a history course where they taught the truth about Columbus and stuff, and I was like, I already knew that. I knew that already, but
I think it's really surprising how many people don't know this story. I mean, a lot of people knew that Henry Ford was anti-Semitic. Some people, I mean, a lot of Jewish families didn't understand, but they knew they never had Ford cars in their families. But they didn't know about the trial, and they certainly didn't know about the one person who stood up, who was doing not just this incredible work to help farmers throughout the North America earn a living and come out of poverty, but that stood up to this one man. I think that's amazing.
One of the aspects that really a light flicked on in my head when I watched this documentary that you introduced that I don't know if I've seen it before, but it stood out with yours, is that you have actor Ben Shankman from Billions to Curb, and he plays Shapiro in this as it's different. The way you shoot it's creative, so it's different than all the other talking head interviews, but you have him reciting actual information and words from Shapiro. When did you decide to approach it that way?
Well, that's interesting because, I didn't want historians or other people to characterize Shapiro because he was such an eloquent speaker. He did a lot of interviews and there was a lot of press about him in the 1920s at the time. And he did many speeches to thousands of people, who gathered at these places. Sometimes they had to come on horseback and by railroad. And it was very difficult to get an assembly, but he did. So I felt very strongly that he should speak for himself. And then I knew of people who recommended Ben very highly. And of course, as soon as I met him, I knew that he was the right person for this. And then Ben and I decided mutually that we didn't want to put him in costume and create a historical recreation and dramatization in the documentary, as some people do. We put him in a contemporary outfit, which was a sports jacket and pants, and talking sort of to the camera using the words from Shapiro, which I think what happens in the film is that initially it's a little unique and people don't quite know what to expect. And then they start to understand and forget, what era Shapiro is in, because his words are very contemporary. And then you start to feel him as a contemporary person. And so it crosses that line. So you're not thinking of, this is an historical film where, when Shapiro talks about democracy and how important it is, that this is something from 100 years ago, that this is something that we are currently involved in and wrestling with at the moment, as he was then, and talking about racial injustice and intolerance and ignorance. I mean, all these issues are right in our radar right now.
Yeah, I feel like you've opened the door for someone to get an actor nomination from some awards thing for a documentary.
He's
for really, a documentary of all things. It'd be like crazy. But
well, yeah, there are documentaries where there's a lot of voiceover, by famous actors. And we could have done that too, but there really wasn't enough archive and photos of him. And honestly, I think his performance is amazing.
Yeah, really. It feels genuine. It feels as real as any of the talking head people you have in the movie, which is crazy. It just seamlessly goes with that.
Oh, thank you.
And it's crazy that it's something different, the way it's lit, the way the angles and everything you have on them, but it just seamlessly flows with all the talking heads.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. We worked hard to get it, and I think a lot of it was Ben, who contributed his intelligence and understanding of the character, and it was great to have that kind of actor to work with.
Have you ever had an itch to do a biopic with all their documentary stuff, and then having an actor like him? Or
yeah, with the Kastner film we had, I don't know that it would have been a biopic so much per se. Dramatization. I'm really hooked right now on. I don't know if you saw it, the new Netflix series about the Pan Am bombing. 103.
I haven't watched that one yet.
It's so brilliant. It's like maybe, and I watched the Lockerbie documentary series that was earlier on. It's really, really well done. And you have to have such a intelligent writer, and the script is fantastic. And it's very similar to what they did with the Chernobyl series too. That intelligence. Only the Brits. What can I say? But it's really well worth watching. But it's an example of when somebody takes a real world story and turns it into a narrative and spends the time and doesn't make it fast and supercilious or superficial, whatever you want, but really does a deep dive and yet keeps your interest and is so, it's great. It's very hard to do.
Excellent. Yeah, actually, yeah. Spiro V. Forward, when it's available, if it's at a festival you're at, don't miss it. It's really worth your time. Interesting to see.
So I'm finishing up one documentary now that I promised to do. It was always sort of on the back burner because the other documentaries where I'm getting paid or I'm, have to. But this one is special to me. It was about a young man. He was 17 at the time, and he lived in the projects in Coney Island. He's African American. In 1990, comes home with a friend after being out for the night, and he finds his mother and his sister and his cousin slain, murdered in the apartment. Ooh. And of course, the cops immediately turn around and try to find a motive and make it about them.
Gotcha.
The two kids. One was 15 and one was 17. And, their idea of a motive was that they had a gay relationship and that the mother disapproved, so they killed her, which was so beyond. And they interrogated the kids. The 15-year-old, they managed to get a confession out of course, after 12 hours of being interrogated with no parents or lawyer. This is about the same time as the Central Park 5 kids were also incarcerated. So Tony ended up spending 20 plus years in Attica for a murder that he didn't commit and not having a family at all after that, And of course he got out because finally they appealed and they found DNA, but it took 24 years to get out.
Nice.
So this is his story, and it's called Murder at a Coney Island Address. And it's really, it's very special to me that we're able to finish the film. And when he got out, there was nothing left. He had nothing. He had no photographs of any of his family, he had no photographs of his own growing, nothing. Everything was gone. And what he really, really wanted was some memory of his mother and sisters. So we brought in this forensic artist from Texas, and she's redrawing his mother and sister from his memory. And as he's doing this, he's telling the story. So we're almost finished, and we're raising money still for the film to finish, but we're hoping that the film is going to premiere, which I'm very excited about, in October. I'm hoping there's an amazing festival called the San Quentin Film Festival. So the actual film festival is in the prison for the prisoners.
All right.
And we really want this to be seen not only for the way that the cops handled the film, but also the prosecutors who knew that these confessions were forced and were corrupt, and continued to prosecute these two kids who, sadly, the 15-year-old lived a year after he was released because his health was so poor in prison. And Tony got 10 years before he passed away last year. And so these kind of wrongful convictions end up not just prison sentences where they take 20 years or more of somebody's life, from 17 to 40, that's huge, but they're death sentences as well. And we want this to be seen. That prosecutors, too, should not have immunity from their actions and the causes of what they do.
Before we head out on things, I had mentioned you before, but I think it's really telling and awesome that when you type in Gaylen Ross into IMDb, it doesn't say Gaylen Ross Dawn of the Dead. It says Gaylen Ross killing Kastner. And I'm going to take it one further. In your section where it says known for, it is known for killing Kastner, Karis Peace, She May, and Title Shot. No Dawn of the Dead. So what your career has really been is really notified there, and
it's great. Although it will always
it's gonna be there.
It's always gonna be Dawn of the Dead.
To see the highlights there being what you've worked so hard on, and you have you have an immense amount of talent in doing, is nice to see that it's recognized in that way. You talked about George Romero's influence and friendship throughout the years. He had done a couple television documentaries that he
did sports films, and he did other docs. And then the thing, George and I have had this really wonderful collegial relationship through the years, because it started out, of course, with Dawn, but then we just became friends, just good friends and professional colleagues. When I was in Toronto working on a film, some documentary. He was editing Bruiser at the time, so I would come into the edit room and take a look. And every time we did a convention together, of course, we always made sure that we had dinner, and also with Suzanne, who very, very sadly, his wife passed away just this month, shockingly. And so I've been good friends with both of them, and also with Christine Romero too, and his daughter Tina. And even when Killing Kastner was being considered for the Toronto Film Festival, which is the gold standard of film festivals, George made all of his efforts, and Suzanne, to make sure that I was introduced to the right people who were considering the film, and had dinner with them, just to help as much as they could. And they were always very eager to know what I did and what I was working on. So it was a big loss. It was a big loss, of course, to the world of film. And it was a loss to me personally as a friend, who I would sit and talk politics with or film or what George liked or what he didn't like. We did a lot of conventions together. So he also taught me, his example of working with crew and cast I thought was really remarkable. I mean, he was not the kind of director that it was an autocrat. He was generous and supportive. And I remember when we were doing Creepshow together, and I had a small part, mostly wet, but we had a good time. And he had, these incredible actors like Marshall, and I can't remember all their names, but, they were formidable actors who had worked with, long list of directors, Hal Holbrook and Vivica Linfors. I mean, and they came to Creepshow with a little trepidation, like, who is this director and what is this horror? And they were serious stage and film actors, and they all left uniformly. They left being totally impressed and enjoying every moment of working with George. And that says a lot, I think.
Very wonderful. But so I very much appreciate the time you've sat with me.
Thank you.
And then again with me in our little pickup here that we've done. It's meant the world, and
thanks a lot. This has been great. And thanks for, it's, as I said, in my obituary, the first line will always be the girl of Dawn the Dead. But, it's nice to know that, 35 years plus of work on documentaries means something as well. I appreciate it.
And where can people keep up? What's the best way for people to keep up with you?
On the website, grfilmsinc.com. That's inc.com. So, you can Google me. I mean, I'm all over the place.
There we go. Awesome.
Thanks a lot, Brandon. I appreciate it.
No problem. I appreciate you. As always, you can find me on the socials at Brandon4KUHD. Always remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel, where you can also find my 4K Blu-ray and DVD reviews. Stick around for the show. It should return Monday. Until then, as always, stay film positive.
Thank you for listening. The Brandon Peters Show is a Creative Zombie Studios production. Produced by Brad Shoemaker and Brandon Peters. Written and edited by Brandon Peters. Announcer vocals by Jessica Alsman. Theme song by Metavari. Web design and show art by Brad Shoemaker with Brandon Peters. All music and clips featured in the episode are property of their respective studios, and no infringement is intended. Additional information on this and other episodes at BrandonPetersShow.com. For any inquiries, press opportunities, or sponsorship, contact mail at BrandonPetersShow.com. The show is available on Apple Music, Spotify, or anywhere podcasts are found.